Hi y'all, Brian S. Pratt here. Going to read chapter 19 of Fires of Prophecy, book 2 of the Morcyth Saga. Just to let everybody know, tomorrow afternoon I'm heading to my girlfriend's. So Sunday, Monday, Tuesday mornings, I may not be doing chapters. We'll see how that goes. But if I can, I'll get them out. If I can't, I'll resume it Wednesday morning. Sorry. Everybody enjoying the heat? Thunderstorms rolled in last night, and so it's going to be cooler today, like 88 for high. All right, chapter 19. A quick recap. Their quest for Miko has led them to Azek, the capital of the empire. Delia went in to trade and ran across a Lord Saga who realized that she was not who she claimed to be. Took her captive, along with Roland, Scar, and Potbelly. James and Zero went in there, found them by magic, and they have just fled the Lord Saita's escape. Now they are on the run. The army's after them, and they're trying to get out of town before they get captured or killed. Will they make it? All right. The streets became dangerous as soldiers and guards raced towards Lord Saitok's estate. Having had to duck into an alley to avoid detection, they waited for the men to pass. When the area was again momentarily clear, James spread his hands wide as 10 small floating spheres appeared before him. With a wave of his hand, they floated off in different directions. "Where are those?" Jerome asked. "Aren't they going to track any mages in the area?" "That's the idea," James replied. "Hopefully, they will be so intent on tracking down what they think are rogue mages that we will be able to slip through unnoticed." "Let's hope so," Jerome said. Once the spheres left the alley, he scanned the area once more. Not seeing anyone in the vicinity, he re-entered the street with the others right behind. He kept them to one side of the street as they made their way to the gate leading out of the inner walled area. As they approached the gate, they saw a squad of soldiers with a mage stationed there. The mage's attention was focused on the street upon which they approached. "Damn!" James exclaimed when he saw them. They ducked down an alley where they paused to determine what they were going to do. "Now what?" Delia asked. "I'm thinking," he replied. "Think faster," Scar said, as he pointed to several squads entering through the gates. The mage gave directions as they moved past, and the squads split up as each went searching in different directions. One turned in their directions and looked to be headed for their alley. "Move," Duran urged as he led them deeper into the alley, away from the approaching soldiers. "The whole army is on the move," Potbelly said from the rear. "We invaded the home of a very powerful, important leader, assaulted and humiliated him," Roland explained. "They will not simply allow us to walk away." The alley ended at another cross street. To the right, the street approached the wall before intersecting with another that ran perpendicular to it. A 3-storied residence had been built right up against the wall. James took a closer look and realized the roof was only several feet from the top of the wall. Jerome glanced to where James looked and grinned. Think that'll work." Making sure the street was clear of soldiers, they departed the alley and made for the building. He went to the door and tried to open it, but discovered it to be locked. No time for niceties. He kicked it in, and the door swung wide, slamming into the wall. Rushing inside, they quickly closed the door behind them. Potbelly moved to a window and looked out. "I don't think anyone saw us." Jerome found the stairs going up and began to climb them when a man appeared at the top with a sword. The man held his sword menacingly as he ascended 3 steps before saying something that could only be interpreted as, "Get out of my home." "I don't have time for this," Jerome said as he drew his knives and moved to the top of the stairs. In a quick exchange, the man's sword clanged on the steps, and Jerome had him backed against the wall. Movement out of the corner of his eye drew his gaze to a woman standing down the hallway with 3 children held tightly to her. Her eyes widened in fear when she saw her husband backed against the wall with a knife to his throat. She spoke to him, and he replied, motioning for them to stay back. Jerome pulled the man from the wall and pushed him toward the woman. To Roland, he said, "Tell them to get in that room," indicating one near the woman. Roland relayed the message, and the woman slowly backed her way into it, taking the children with her. One of her younger girls began to cry, and she did her best to quiet her. "Tell them to be quiet, and we won't kill them." Jerome said as he pushed the man into the room with his family. Grabbing his children, the man turned to Roland and listened, then nodded and replied. Roland said, "They will be silent." Jerome shut the door. They found another set of steps leading up, and they raced to the third floor. "Split up and find access to the roof," Jerome said as he continued down the hallway. Doors were open as they hurriedly searched the rooms for a way to the roof. They knew time was against them. "Here!" they heard Scar yell from the far end of the building. Set in the ceiling of a small room was a trap door with a rope hanging down from it. Pulling on it, the trap door swung open and a ladder extended down, allowing access to the roof. With Scar in the lead, they climbed the ladder, and when everyone was on the roof, James severed the rope for the trap door before pulling it closed behind them. The inner town wall loomed just 5 feet above the roof of the building. Jerome ran over to it and jumped, grabbing hold of the top, and then pulled himself up onto the wall. He reached down a hand and helped Scar up just as a guard patrolling the wall saw them and began sounding the alarm. Drawing his sword, the guard rushed toward them. Once Scar reached the top, he drew his swords and moved to engage the approaching guard while Jerome helped the others up. In trepidation, he observed 3 more coming up fast behind the first. "Hurry up, man, we got company!" he hollered just before he parried a thrust by the guard. Jerome helped Potbelly up, who rushed to Scar's aid. Dilly came next, then Roland, and finally James. Scar and Potbelly had disposed of the first guard and were moving to intercept the 3 oncoming guards. Jerome raced to help them as James tried to figure out where they needed to be going. On the other side of the wall, all the houses were at least 15 feet away. Made sense, he reasoned. They let people on the inside build close because they were not worried about people getting out so much as they were about getting in. It was a 30-foot drop to the ground. The wall extended all the way to the outer wall. James looked to where Jerome and the others fought just as the last guard fell. He cried out, "Toward the outer wall, hurry!" 2 more soldiers ran to intercept them from the direction of the outer wall, and the fighters moved to engage. Roland and Delia hurried after Jerome and the others, with James right behind. Jerome took the first one as Potbelly blocked a downward hack from the second, and then followed through with a thrust, taking him through the stomach just below the breastbone. He kicked the guard off his sword with his foot as Jerome pushed the guard he struggled with over the wall. The man's scream could be heard until it was silenced upon impact. Behind them, 8 more were headed their way. One had a crossbow and let fly with a bolt that narrowly missed Scar. James turned and took a slug, which he threw, hitting the crossbowman square in the chest. The man stumbled backward, his crossbow clattering on the wall as he toppled over the edge. "Here!" Roland hollered. They turned and found a bucket tied to a long rope. "We can climb down." James glanced down the outward side of the wall and didn't see anyone. "Looks clear," he told them. He and Roland held the rope as Jerome shinnied down. Scar and Potbelly positioned themselves to hold off the oncoming guards, giving the others a chance to retreat. As Jerome made it to the ground, the guards reached Scar and Potbelly. The clash of swords could be heard as they engaged. Turning to Delia, James said, "You're next." He and Roland held the rope secure while she made her way down. Glancing to the fighting, James saw one of the guards had already fallen, but Scar and Potbelly were slowly giving ground as they were pushed backward by the remaining 7. Roland told James, "Go on!" Shaking his head, he said, "You first." Not wanting to take the time to argue, Roland took the rope and swung over the side. James glanced back at Scar and Potbelly, and it didn't look good. Even though another guard had hit the ground, there were still too many. It was only a matter of time before one or the other fell. The tension on the rope disappeared, and he looked down, seeing that Roland had made it to the ground safely. "Come on!" Roland hollered up to him. Securing the end of the rope around a Merlin, he shouted over to the fighters, "Let's go!" Scar replied, "We'll never make it." He parried with one sword and then took the guard through the stomach with the other. "You go, we'll hold them off." Potbelly was holding his own, but there was just too many for them to last. As he watched them fighting, anger and frustration built within him until it was like a white-hot sun. "Scar, Potbelly, get down, now!" his voice thundered. Almost reflexively, they dropped to the ground as an invisible wave passed over them. The guards were lifted and thrown backward, forward blown completely off the wall by the unseen force. Screams accompanied them as they fell to their deaths. Once it passed, Scar and Potbelly scrabbled back to their feet and hurried to James, where he staggered a little and steadied himself against the Merlin. Scar asked, "Are you okay?" Nodding, James said, "Let's get off this wall." He saw the remaining 3 guards get back up and started to head their way. James went first, followed by Scar and Potbelly. When James reached the ground, he said to Jerome, "What I did up there is going to be like a beacon for every mage in the city. They're going to know where we are." "Then let's get out of here," Jerome said. Once Potbelly was down, they raced through the streets. hunting for the main gates of the city. The squad of 5 turned into the street ahead of them, coming in their direction. When they saw James's group running toward them, they let out a cry and drew their swords as they rushed to attack. A slug struck one, felling him before they even got close. Jerome took the next one, knives flashing as they parried and struck. Potbelly and Scar faced the remaining 3. Scar's 2 swords quickly took out one while Potbelly held his own with the second, but was unable to gain an opening to finish him. Scar engaged the remaining one and soon had him on the ground. "You got him?" he asked, looking over to Potbelly as they continued exchanging blows with the guard. "Yeah," he replied as he blocked and held his opponent's sword with his knife, while following up with his sword, taking him through the chest. His sword got caught in between his opponent's ribs and was unable to be pulled free. Leaving the sword, he grabbed the dead guard's weapon just as Jerome's opponent fell to the ground. Then they were off for the gate. The area was relatively clear as most of the guards and soldiers had gone to the intersection of the city to join in the hunt. They were able to speed through the streets without fear of being attacked, and it wasn't long before the gates appeared ahead of them. "There they are!" Jerome shouted with joy. Joy turned to dread when they spied 30 soldiers in formation before the gate. At their head stood a mage. "You cannot escape," the mage shouted. "You are greatly outnumbered." James took a slug and threw it at the mage, who erected a barrier, causing it to ricochet off harmlessly. Harmlessly. I don't think I need off. The mage just smiled as he made ready to cast a spell. James encountered with a spell he'd been devising for just such a time and was able to release it before the other could cast his. The mage knew James had done something but couldn't detect what. He released a bolt of power. His protective shield suddenly turned orange as the bolt deflected off the shield, turning back onto the mage. With a scream, the bolt blasted through the mage before striking the shield and rebounding once again. The bolt then The mage just smiled as he made ready to cast a spell. James countered with a spell he'd been advising for just such a time and was able to release it before the other could cast his. The mage knew James had done something but couldn't detect what. He released a bolt of power. His protective shield suddenly turned orange as the bolt deflected off the shield, turning back onto the mage. Okay, so is it clear what I just said, that James had altered or covered the mage's shield with something that would reflect magic back at him? Because that's what happened. I don't know if you guys ever caught that. Maybe I made it too not clear. If that needs to be clarified better, let me know. With a scream, the bolt blasted through the mage before striking the shield and rebounding once again. The bolt then proceeded to ricochet from one side of the shield to another until finally running its course. James released his spell on the shield, and the mage, now a charred corpse, fell to the ground. In stunned silence, the guards of the gate stared for a second at the smoking remnants of their mage lying in the street. Then a roar erupted from them as they charged forward. Hrumph! James released the power again, and the ground under the approaching men exploded upward, tossing bodies and debris in every direction. A few men were forward of the area and were thrown to the ground by the blast. Jerome and the other pit fighters quickly closed the distance before they had a chance to recover and took them out. From deeper within the city came the sound of running feet as hundreds of guards and soldiers, those who had been searching the inner area of the city, raced to catch them. "To the gate!" James cried as he ran through the rubble and body-strewn area. "But it's closed," Lily cried as she hurried behind him. "Leave that to me," James told her. From atop the wall, crossbowmen rained bolts upon them, but by luck's good grace, they failed to hit their mark. At the gate, they turned to see the courtyard beginning to fill with soldiers. "There are too many," Scar exclaimed. "James, hurry!" Jerome yelled as he and the other pit fighters turned to face the oncoming men. Being within the portcullis area, the crossbowmen up on the wall were no longer able to fire upon them. James stood at the gate, his hands resting against them. Then, with an ear-deafening crash, the gates flew open and James sagged to the ground. On the other side, 2 guards stood in stunned amazement. Scar and Potbelly quickly turned and ran through the gate, taking them out in short order. Jerome helped James, practically carried him as they hurried through the gate. Behind them, a swarm of men armed with swords filled the streets as they raced for the broken gates, hot on their trail. Crossbow bolts flew from the walls once they passed beyond the area beneath the protective cover, but none found their mark. Suddenly, they heard horses approach from the southwest. Hooves thundered toward them across the bridge that spanned the river. Getting set to sell their lives dearly, they were stunned to find Shorty and Yorn racing toward them. Behind them were Ezra and Stig, as well as extra horses for each of them. Come on, Shorty yelled as they raced forward. He got down and helped Jerome get James to the saddle. Can you stay mounted? Jerome asked. James nodded. Yeah. See that you do. Then to Shorty. Keep an eye on him. The knifer nodded and mounted his own horse. Jerome vaulted into the saddle, stunned, turned his horse toward the bridge and kicked it into motion. Hold on a second. They raced back toward the bridge. Potbelly cried out as a bolt struck him in the side. Potbelly, Scar yelled as he slowed to come to his friend's aid. I'll make it, Potbelly yelled as he held his side. Bursts of pain exploded from the wound with every stride the horse took. As they crossed the bridge, James slowed his horse and then came to a stop. He swung down from the saddle. We can't stop, man, Shorty said as he came back to him. Jerome glanced back and saw James and Shorty on foot. He pulled up and hollered, What are you doing? Delaying them, he replied. I may not be good for much after this, so be prepared. I need a few minutes. Looking back at the mass of soldiers running toward them, he said, You ain't got a few minutes. James ignored him as he concentrated. For a moment, the center of the bridge glowed deep amber, then became dark again. James's knees buckled and Shorty caught him. Damn, Jerome cursed. Jerome dismounted and helped Shorty get him back into the saddle. They used rope to secure James in place. He and Shorty remounted. Jerome took James's reins while Shorty rode alongside him just in case. They rejoined the others who waited 100 yards away. What did you stop for? Scar asked as they approached. I don't know, Shorty replied. Let's get going. As they galloped away, the first of the pursuing men reached the bridge. Crumph! The concussion wave washed over them and they turned to see the bridge exploding into the air. A 20-foot gap now separated the two sides of the river. Damn, Scar said. I think Scar exclaimed. Yeah. Exclaimed is better. Let's move, Jerome hollered. We don't know how long we'll have before they manage to get around that. Potbelly groaned and then began to topple off his horse. Scar leapt down and hurried to his friend's side, catching him before he hit the ground. Potbelly looked up to Scar as he laid him on the ground. I guess this is my last fight. Dilly came to them and examined the wound. He hit nothing vital, she told Scar. If we can get the blood to stop, he should be all right. Jerome looked back at the river and saw that they had already begun moving boats toward the broken bridge to begin ferrying men across. We don't have much time. Whatever you're going to do it fast. We don't need much, she said as she tore a strip of cloth from her shirt. Jerome looked again and saw 10 men disembarking from the boats. They raced forward to close with them. 2 knives flew in quick succession as Shorty took out 2. Hurry, please, Jerome said as he and the others moved to engage the oncoming men. Side by side, the pit fighters stood, giving Dilly time to administer to Potbelly. Scar was a terrible foe as his anger for what happened to his friend found an outlet. His 2 swords weaved a pattern to death no soldier willingly entered or left alive. As she bound the wound, she left the bolt in his side. Roland asked, Aren't you going to take it out? No, she said. If I do it, it'll leave a hole allowing more blood to escape. He's already lost too much as it is. The attackers fell like stalks of grain before the scythe as they engaged the waiting fighters. Keeping her mind on Potbelly and doing her best to ignore the fighting going on less than 15 feet away, she finally finished binding his wound. With Roland's help, they managed to get him on a horse, securing him in place using rope as they had with James. Once he was secured, she turned and yelled, Let's go! She quickly mounted her horse as the pit fighters took out the few remaining soldiers and then ran to where their horses waited. Glancing back to the river, she saw 2 more boats disembarking and another 20 soldiers. Hurry, she yelled to Scar and the others as they reached the horses and leapt into the saddles. Crossbow bolts flew at them from the river, but from that distance they posed no real threat. Back into the saddle, they turned and raced down the road, leaving the enemy far behind. After putting several miles between them, they slowed the horses, saving them should speed be required. Where did the other horses come from? Jerome asked Shorty. After you left, we figured that we might need to leave in a hurry, so we traded all the wagons and the goods for the horses. What about the money chest? Dilly asked. It's divided among the saddlebags, he told her. Each horse is carrying roughly the same amount. Jerome nodded approvingly. Smart thinking. Shorty smiled back and replied, We knew you guys wouldn't be able to leave without disturbing a few people. Yeah, the Orton interjected. So we positioned ourselves near the wall and just listened where the commotion was the loudest and figured that would be where you were. You figured right, Scar said, as he rode next to his friend Potbelly. We're going to need to find some place to hold up for a while so Potbelly can recover. Any ideas? Jerome asked. We could cut cross country and try to find some place out in the wild, Roland suggested. That would be the first place I would look if I was them, Jerome replied. Of course, any place near here will be searched in no time as well. No, I think we better put as much distance between us and them as we can. Stay on the road as long as possible. Scar understood the logic, but was worried for his friend, who didn't look very good. Hang in there, Pot, old boy, he said to him. A little after midnight, James regained consciousness, though he was still extremely weak and tired. What's going on? He asked, looking around groggily. We've been riding all night, ever since you blew the bridge, Jerome explained. Right now, we're looking for a place to stop and rest. James shook his head. Can't take the chance that their forces will get ahead of us. We've got to keep going. Potbelly's in a bad way and the horses are tired, Jerome explained. We can't keep going much longer. I'll leave it to your judgment then, he said, before passing out. Roland came up next to him and asked, why not go off the road here and see if we can find a spot? We've traveled a long ways and hopefully their patrols won't reach this far so fast. You're probably right, he agreed. Anyway, James and Potbelly need rest. He led them off the road and they traveled across country for another hour before coming to an old abandoned farmhouse. They brought James and Potbelly inside, then picketed their horses nearby. Dilly had them lay Potbelly on the floor in the front room. Scar stayed with her while the others saw to the horses. She unwound his bandages from around the bolt. She looked at Scar and said, it's time for this to come out. Removing the rest of the bandages, they saw where the skin around the shaft of the bolt had begun to turn red. Drops of blood continued to seep around it. He nodded as he watched her take out a needle and remove a thread from her shirt. When she had the thread through the eye of the needle and tied securely, she said, all right, gently remove the bolt and I'll sew it closed. Scar grabbed the portion of the bolt sticking out of Potbelly's side and looked at Delia, who nodded. Then with a gentle, even draw, removed the bolt. Blood immediately began to stream out. Quickly, she said, pinch the wound closed so I can sew it together. As he held the wound together to inhibit the flow of blood, she looked to the unconscious Potbelly and murmured, glad you're not awake for this. He continued holding the wound together until Delia had completely sewn it closed. Tying it off, she had him remove his hands and the stitches held securely. Only a few drops of blood continued to seep intermittently between the stitches. Taking some water, she washed Potbelly's side and then dried it with an extra shirt. Using strips of cloth torn from yet another shirt, she bound the wound. Once done, she said to Scar, we need to rest here at least a day to let this heal. Keep a watch on him and don't allow him to move around very much. We don't want him to tear open the stitches. I will, he assured her as he settled down next to his friend. When the others returned from picketing the horses, Jerome set up a watch schedule and took the first shift. He found a place outside where he could see anyone approaching and settled in until it was Scar's turn. Shortly after Shorty began his watch, Dilly came and sat with him. You need to rest, he told her. In a moment, she replied. Just wanted to get out of there for a bit. Potbelly snores bothering you? He asked with a smile. No, not really, she replied back. Whenever I close my eyes, I'm back on the table being interrogated. He put his arm around her. It'll get better over time. Some things, especially intense situations like that, have a way of hanging around longer than others. I suppose, she said. She gave him a quick glance and continued. Did anyone tell you why he captured us? He shook his head. No, not yet. Well, the last package on the list was for his estate, she explained. When we went to deliver the goods, the man at the gate called the guards and had us taken. It seemed that the smugglers worked for Lord Cytalk. In fact, his is the name on that letter James has been showing everyone. That makes sense. Yeah, they held us until he arrived and then the questioning began. He wanted to know how the letter and the cargo came to be in our possession. He hadn't been very long before you arrived. She laid her head on his shoulder and sobbed. Thank you. He held her close. They sat there silently as she let out all the emotions bottled up since the ordeal. I don't think Shorty went with him, did he? Did Shorty go with him? I'll have to check that out. I'll have to check that out. I think it was just James and Jerome, right? I don't think Shorty went with them. I'm gonna change that before help arrived. He held her close. They sat there silently as she let out all the emotions bottled up since the ordeal. Hang on. Oh, never mind. See, I shouldn't do this when I'm tired. Because she was talking to Jerome not shortly. The reason why I thought it was shortly is that shortly after beginning his watch, and in my head is that for some reason it translated to shorty began his watch. Okay, never mind. Let's ignore all what I just did. Okay, all right, let me change this back. Hang on a second. All right, there we go. Sorry about that. When she was done, she wiped her eyes and said, "I should check on Potbelly." Jerome gave her one more hug and then said, "Once you do, get some sleep. You look like you could use it." Nodding, she turned back to the house and took a step before pausing. She came back and gave him one last hug. He watched her until she was inside the house. Brushing away the tear that had fallen, he turned his attention back to the road. Late in the night, during Stig's turn at watch, horses passed off in the distance. He hurried closer to try and get a better look. In the moonlight, a company of 20 horsemen rode past, headed east. He continued watching them until they did disappear into the night. When he woke Yorn for his turn, he mentioned the riders before turning in. Yorn kept a watchful eye and ear out for any other visitors, but his watch passed quietly. "This is not the afterlife," Scar assured Potbelly when he woke, thinking he was dead. "It's not?" he asked, confused. "But I died last night." He sat up, even though the pain in his side throbbed greatly. "Don't you dare tear out those stitches," Scar admonished him severely. He laid a hand on his friend and said, "You need to rest and let your body heal." Potbelly gave his friend a knowing look as he knocked the hand off his shoulder. "Don't need no nursemaid," he exclaimed. "Been hurt worse than this many times in the pits." "Stubborn," Scar told him. "That's what you are." Teresa walked over to see how he was doing, and Potbelly asked, "Are you sure this isn't the afterlife? For there surely must stand an angel." She smiled at him and asked, "How are you doing?" "Better," he replied, "seeing as how I'm not dead." "Well, that's good," she told him. "Jerome was saying that we might stay here till tomorrow." "What for?" Potbelly asked. "So we can rest and you can heal." "Heal? Me?" he asked, as if the thought had never occurred to him. "Now don't be thinking that I need any rest." He started to rise and said through teeth clenched in pain, "I hardly even noticed it." "Be that as it may," she said, "we're here for a while, so you may as well take advantage of it and heal the best you can." She gave him a playful yet stern gaze. "Yes, ma'am," he replied as he settled back to the floor. "Keep an eye on him," she said to Scar, giving him a wink and a smile. "You can count on it," he assured her as he turned his gaze to Potbelly. "You rest." Potbelly gave them both a small smile as he laid back and soon drifted off to sleep. On the other side of the room, James had awakened and was speaking with Jerome. "Did everyone make it?" he asked. "Yeah," Jerome replied. "We're all here. Potbelly took a bolt in the side, but he'll survive." "That's good," James said. "We probably should get going soon." "You need rest," James told him, "and Potbelly could use a day with his wound to heal." "We may not have that much time," warned James. "They're going to want us bad. Lord Cytok will want revenge for what we did to him." He looked to Jerome and said, "He'll mobilize everything he can to search for us." "What should we do?" he asked. "I'm still going after Miko, but the rest of you should try to get out of the Empire," he said. "You help me get Teresa back. I'm not going to leave you before you rescue your friend." James looked at him a moment and then replied, "Very well. We are near the coast, or at least we were. Maybe we can sneak into a port town and get passage for the others on a ship sailing up the coast to Cardry. If the Empire isn't yet at war with them, then there should still be unrestricted access for Cardry captains." Joe nodded. "With them out of danger, you and I can go after your friend. We just need to figure a way into a port where a Cardry ship is at anchor. That's going to be the tricky part," agreed Jerome. "What's going to be a tricky part?" asked Yorn as he came over and joined the conversation. Jerome quickly filled him in on the plan thus far. "You and the others need to get Teresa and Dilly to a safe place and hold up while we're rescuing his friend. Take her to Trindle. It's a village to the north of Baron," suggested James. "When you get there, find a forest ward by the name of Saren and let him know what's going on. He should be able to get you settled while you wait for us to join you." "All right," agreed Yorn. "Now," James said, "ready or not, we need to get out of here." Jerome shook his head. "One more day." will leave in one more day. And that's it. That's chapter 19. So they made it out. Potbelly's hurt, but otherwise doing good. James is getting better at magic, more creative, which is good. Of course, if he'd been doing this with the skill he has in travail time, it would have been less of an issue. Anyway, so they're trying to find a way to get everybody home. All right. The whole reason, though, everybody but James and Jerome are being sent off to Cardry and safety, is because I was getting tired of writing everybody. I liked it better with just James and Jerome. It's easier to write a story with just those two. But when you have a whole cast, you have to bring them in every once in a while, if nothing more than just a comment here and there, just to keep them in the minds of the reader. So it's not like they got lost or something. And I just got tired of doing it. So I just sent everybody to the ranch, and that was it. Of course, it wasn't the ranch at this point. It was just Trendle, because they hadn't started the ranch yet. But yeah, and I'm feeling that woe right now in Relic of the Ancients, Travail 4. Right, I got so many moving parts. That's going to end after this book. I'm not going to have so many moving parts with this book. But this one here, I got so many things going at one time. It's really quite convoluted, but I think it's going okay. And several of the moving parts are starting to join and become singular, so it's not too bad. And yeah, I don't want it to go into like the Wheel of Time. I don't want that. I want to get back to mainly James and Jerome, or just a couple moving parts. The next series will be more linear, more just James and stuff. At least mostly. Yeah, I got tired of writing everybody. So that was chapter 19. Chapter 20, we'll see them find a port and get everybody to safety. And it really makes sense, because you got Tersa, who's non-combative. You've got Ezra and Baby Archie. Those three there, if nothing else, should be sent to safety. And the only way to do that is by ship. And so you got to send people with them to protect them. So just send everybody. Right? Just send everybody. All right, chapter 20 next tomorrow, and then I may be gone for 3 days while I spark my honey. She's flying back from Omaha today, and then tomorrow I'll be with her, so she'll probably be in a lot of discomfort tomorrow from all the flying and stuff. Take care. I'll talk to you tomorrow.